My name is Sylvia Okafor, and I'm 34 years old. The morning I ran into my former mother-in-law, I was standing in the returns line at the Loblaws on Dundas Street West, holding a bag of overripe mangoes and mentally calculating whether I had time to grab a coffee before my 12 o'clock at the firm. It was a Wednesday in late October, the kind of gray Toronto morning where the sky can't decide whether to rain or just threaten it, and I was wearing my good coat, the charcoal wool one I'd bought myself the previous Christmas as a reminder that I was allowed to have nice things again. I noticed her before she noticed me. She was at the customer service counter, speaking to the young man behind the desk, in the particular tone she reserved for people she considered beneath her, that bright, clipped politeness that was somehow ruder than rudeness. She was holding a receipt and pointing at it repeatedly, and I had exactly enough time to wonder whether I could drift backward into the cereal aisle before her eyes swept across the store and found me. She smiled, not because she was happy to see me. I'd known her long enough to understand the difference between her smiles, the one for people she wanted something from, the one for her husband's colleagues at the golf club dinners she used to drag me to, and the one she saved for moments she'd been rehearsing. This was the third kind. "Sylvia," she said, stepping away from the counter like she'd forgotten the receipt entirely. "Of all places." "Hi," I said. I kept my voice even. I was very good at keeping my voice even by then. She looked me over the way she always had, starting at my shoes, working her way up, arriving at my face last, as though my face was the part that mattered least. "You look well," she said, which in her language meant, "You look fine, considering." "Thank you," I said. "How are you?" She waved her hand. "Oh, you know. Busy. Marcus keeps me running." Marcus was my ex-husband. She said his name the way some people say my son the doctor, or my son the lawyer, even when the son is neither. She had always orbited around him like a planet that had forgotten it was supposed to have its own gravity. "Actually," she said, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel like a confidence, while keeping it just loud enough for the cashier 2 stations over to hear, "I've been meaning to say something to you for a while." I shifted the bag of mangoes to my other hand. "You know, when Marcus told me the two of you were separating, I was upset. Of course I was. But Sylvia, honestly, and I say this as someone who always wished you well." She paused here, to let me absorb how much she'd always wished me well. "Leaving you was the best thing he ever did for himself. He's thriving. He really is. The new place is gorgeous. He's got his whole life back. And Stephanie," she smiled again, wider this time, "they're having a baby in March." She let that sit there between us like something she'd just gift-wrapped. Stephanie. My former best friend since second year at Ryerson. The woman who had been my maid of honor. Who had helped me pack up the apartment on Brunswick Avenue when the marriage ended. Who had cried on my behalf and said things like, "You deserve so much better, and I can't believe he did this to you." I had found out about her and Marcus 4 months after the separation, in the way you find out about things you were never supposed to know. By accident, on a Thursday, through a mutual friend who assumed I already knew. I hadn't spoken to either of them since. My mother-in-law was watching my face the way you watch a pot you expect to boil. Her expression had that faint anticipatory brightness to it. She wanted tears, or anger, or the particular crumpling that happens when someone has been holding something together, and the right word finally breaks the seam. What I felt, standing there under the fluorescent lights with my overripe mangoes and my good coat, was something much quieter than what she was hoping for. I thought about the 18 months since the papers were signed. The way I'd had to relearn how to sleep in the middle of a bed instead of the edge. The calls to my mum in Scarborough that ran long and cost more than they should have, and helped more than I can explain. The Saturday mornings I spent in my apartment on Ossington, making jollof rice from scratch, because it was the only thing that felt like an anchor when everything else had come loose. The first time I realized I had gone an entire day without thinking about Marcus at all, and how that felt less like freedom and more like surfacing after a very long time underwater. "Is that right?" I said. It wasn't sharp, it wasn't wounded. It was just a sentence. The kind you say when someone tells you something that has lost the power to touch you. Her smile flickered. She had expected a different kind of sentence. "I just think," she said, pressing on, the certainty in her voice thinning slightly even as the words stayed firm, "that you should know what your life could have looked like. A real family, Sylvia. Roots. Something to build toward. Marcus is giving Stephanie everything I just hope you found something." She said something the way people say something when they mean anything at all, probably nothing much. I looked past her, toward the produce section, where a man was carefully selecting bell peppers with the focused concentration of someone who had nowhere else to be, and was entirely at peace with that. I thought about how much I could learn from that man. "You should finish up at the counter," I said. "Looks like they're getting busy." She opened her mouth. I could see her recalibrating, reaching for something else, another sentence she had polished and saved for this exact kind of moment. I had 15 years of practice watching her reach. She didn't get to use it. The automatic doors at the front of the store slid open. A man walked through them. Not tall in a showy way, just present in the particular way that some people are present, like the room rearranges itself slightly to account for them. He was wearing a blazer over a gray Henley, carrying a reusable bag from the grocery co-op on College Street, and he was already scanning the store the way people do when they're looking for someone specific rather than something. His eyes found me. His expression did something, not a big thing, just a softening, like a key finding its lock. "Sorry," he said, crossing toward me. The streetcar was a nightmare. Spadina was backed up all the way to King. He leaned down and pressed a quick kiss to my temple, then glanced at the bag in my hand. "Did they take them back?" "Working on it," I said. He turned to look at my former mother-in-law, and I watched the recognition move across her face the way weather moves across the lake. First distant, then arriving all at once. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Which was remarkable, because in all the years I had known her, I had never once seen her at a loss for what to say. "Mrs. Hallett," he said. His voice was pleasant, professionally pleasant. The kind that comes not from warmth but from practice at keeping warmth and distance in exactly the right proportion. "I didn't realize you still shopped in this neighborhood." "You?" she managed then. "You two know each other? We're getting married," I said. "In June." She looked at me. She looked at him. The color in her face was doing something interesting. He reached over and took the bag from my hand in the easy, unconscious way of someone who has memorized your habits. "I'll take this to the desk. I know the weekend manager." He glanced back at her. "Nice to see you." And then he was gone, 3 steps away, and she was standing there with her receipt still in her hand, and the expression of someone who has arrived at a party expecting to deliver news and discovered the party already knew. "That's," she started. "That's not." She stopped. I waited. "He's the one who bought Cartwright Development," she said. It came out very quietly, almost like she was saying it to herself, confirming something she needed confirmed. "He's the one who restructured the whole portfolio. He runs the Western Acquisitions Division at Meridian Capital," I said. "Yes." Cartwright Development was the mid-sized construction firm that had done most of its work in Hamilton and the Niagara region. My ex-husband had been their regional contracts manager for 6 years. He had told me, back when we were still married and he was still telling me things, that Cartwright was his long game. That if he stayed long enough, there was a partnership track, real equity, the kind of financial foundation that would let us, he had said then, do whatever we wanted eventually. Meridian Capital had acquired a controlling stake in Cartwright 11 months ago. The restructuring that followed had been, from what I understood, significant. Several departments consolidated, several contracts renegotiated, several positions made redundant. She knew this. From the way the color was still draining from her face, she knew exactly what she had been standing next to for the past 5 minutes. "Marcus," she said, not to me, just the name, like a question. "I haven't spoken to Marcus in 18 months, I said. I really couldn't tell you, which was true. I genuinely did not know what the restructuring had meant for him specifically. I had not asked. I had made a deliberate practice of not asking about things I no longer needed to know. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her before. It wasn't quite guilt. It was closer to the look people get when they realize they have been playing a game they thought they understood, and the board was arranged differently than they thought. "Sylv," she started. "You should call him," I said. "If you're worried," I said it gently. Not because I owed her gentleness, but because I genuinely did not have any other feeling left about her. The anger I had carried for the first year, about the dinners where she had talked over me, about the comments, about my career being more of a lifestyle than a real plan, about the way she had treated my family like a footnote to Marcus's story. That anger had burned through its fuel a long time ago. What was left wasn't even embers, it was just an empty grate. Clean, she turned, not abruptly, too slowly for that, like a ship making a correction. She walked toward the exit without saying goodbye, her heels quiet on the linoleum, her posture very careful, the careful posture of someone trying not to look like they're hurrying. He came back from the customer service desk without the bag, handing me the refund slip. "Did it go okay?" he asked, Fine, I said. He looked at me for a moment. He was good at reading the kind of thing I wasn't saying, which was one of the reasons I had stopped bothering to not say things. Was that who I think it was? Yes. He was quiet for a second. Not the uncomfortable kind of quiet, just the kind where someone is deciding whether to say more or let you lead. It was one of the things I had noticed about him first, that he was comfortable with silence, the way people are comfortable with it when they've learned it's not always a problem to solve. Coffee before your meeting, he said. Yes, I said. Definitely. We walked out through the automatic doors into the gray October morning, the kind of morning that still hadn't decided what it wanted to do. The streetcar was coming down Dundas, its bell clanging at a car that had drifted too far into the lane, and the whole city was doing its usual Wednesday thing, just existing, unimpressed with itself, getting on with it. He reached for my hand. I let him take it. I want to tell you something, because if you've stayed with me this long, I think you might understand it. When I was in the middle of the worst of it, the separation, the Stephanie of it all, the particular loneliness of grieving something you know wasn't even that good to begin with. I used to wonder what it would feel like when things got better. I had a very specific image. It involved some kind of confrontation, some moment where I got to say the right thing, where the people who had underestimated me had to stand there and understand fully what they had misjudged. I never imagined it would feel like this. Not triumphant, not even particularly satisfying, just quiet. A Tuesday-ish Wednesday morning outside a grocery store, holding a refund slip, walking toward coffee with someone who already knew what I wanted without having to ask. She had walked into that store believing she was carrying a bomb. She had believed for 18 months that she understood exactly what my life looked like, diminished, rearranged, smaller than it used to be. She had constructed an entire story about what I had lost, and she had polished that story until it shone, and she had waited for the right moment to deliver it. And the thing is, she wasn't entirely wrong. I had lost things. Real things. The version of the future I had believed in for nearly a decade. A friendship that turned out to be a performance. A marriage that had hollowed itself out long before anyone signed anything. Those losses were real, and I had grieved them in full, and I did not want to minimize them by pretending they had led directly and neatly to something better. But she was wrong about the part that mattered. She thought losing those things had made me smaller. She had spent 18 months believing I was somewhere diminished, waiting to be reminded of what I used to have. I was not. He squeezed my hand once as we reached the corner, waiting for the light to change. "What do you want?" he asked. "Oat lattes," I said. "The one on Ossington, not the one on Queen." "Obviously," he said. The light changed. We walked. And somewhere behind us, in a grocery store on Dundas Street West, a woman was standing in the produce section, holding a receipt she had forgotten to finish arguing about, recalculating something she had been very certain of 5 minutes ago. I don't know what she found when she did the math. I didn't need to. The best thing I ever did for myself was not the leaving. The leaving was just the beginning. The best thing I ever did was refuse to stay small while I waited to see what came next. I went to work every day, and I built the kind of life that didn't need anyone's approval to make sense. And somewhere in the middle of all that ordinary effort, quietly and without announcement, everything I had been building while I wasn't looking turned out to be exactly enough. If you've been through something that made someone else believe you were diminished, I want you to hear this. The proof is not in the confrontation. You don't have to win a conversation to have one. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply still be standing, still building, still choosing yourself, when they finally happen to walk back into your line of sight. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.